Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 460. Sorry for the quiet demeanor. We're actually in the lobby of our hotel in Den Haag, Netherlands. And as such, do not want to disturb the other people that are doing work also in the lobby today. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us live. Show 460, as mentioned, we are in Den Haag, Netherlands. And have an interesting topic to bring up today because it's kind of more about chances of sitting back and looking at some of the things that have happened this past couple of weeks in relationship to the modality of how people approach marketers, hospitality marketers are approaching how we're doing our work. Now, what inspired this to a small degree was I've seen a proliferation of really cheap quasi people trying to become agencies or service providers for hospitality, where they're offering kind of like the old adage of we'll put you number one on Google, so forth and so on. And from that comes the problem that they're really just using PMAX. They're becoming an intermediary. They're offering, oh, we're going to do this. You don't have to do about anything. We'll take care of everything. We'll make sure that your ads are running. We'll make sure that your videos are on. Literally what PMAX offers. And in exchange, you're paying them to basically do what you can do for yourself. Because once it's turned on, it's done. Now, I'm not proliferating on using PMAX. There are modalities of PMAX that are interesting as it gets better. But the reality of these agencies coming on and basically offering it all, I've also seen new agencies coming on. I wouldn't even call them agencies, garage bands, startups, wannabes, that are offering, we'll take care of everything, you just pay us commission. And that is so dangerous because you're surrendering all of your business once they take credit for it. So anything that you got from your website before, anything that you got off of your advertising before, anything that you get people doing searches before, they're going to take credit for all of it. And they're going to say they produced it. And you're going to end up paying them the commissions for it. All of this brings me up to the topic that I put up today. And that is breaking lazy. How Skeuomorphism is keeping us average. Skeuomorphism is a term that I came across in a dialogue of an article that I thought was very fascinating. They were showing old icons of things, like why do we still use the traditional phone icon? Why do we still have traditional paper folder icons? And I want to know what those were called. It came up in an article that those are skeuomorphs. Now, let me read you the definition of a skeuomorph. A skeuomorph is a derivative object that retains ornamental design cues, attributes, from structures that were necessary to the original. Skeuomorphs are typically used to make something new feel familiar in an effort to speed understanding and acclimation. They employ elements that, while essential to the original object, serve no pragmatic purpose in the new system. Strangely enough, this term came from the idea of why is there a little glass loop on maple syrup bottles? It has no functional use. You don't use it to pour the maple syrup out. It was a euphemism of the way jugs were used before the packaging for maple syrup was changed. And so in order to make people feel like it was the same product, they kept a visual representation of what the product used to be in on the new bottling and packaging of it so that people would feel the connection between what it was and what it is. And we can say that firsthand. Anytime something completely changes from what it was before to where it is now, we want some tangible link to it, some visceral connection that this is what that was before. Kind of like old phones. You talk about old people of a phone that was on a wall, had a hand cradle. If you go far enough back, it had a rotary dial. If you go farther than back, it had a lever. You had to connect to the operator. The operator connected you to whatever it is you wanted to talk to. Those visualizations carried forward so that we have some sense of continuity to them. Well, why am I bringing this up in relationship to breaking lazy? We are still traditionally taking the new tools that we have available to us in our industry and still using them in the old ways because we mentally are connected to them, the old ways. Now, the first laziness aspect is what I just referred to. These fly-by-night garage band startup wannabes that are running around saying, we're going to take care of everything for you. We're going to handle your entire marketing. It's going to be great. You don't have anything to worry about. Just sign on the dotted line that we get credit for everything and pay commissions on it. And all they do is they run off and they create an automated program with Google, and they bank your money for doing very little to no work other than relying on your ignorance that you didn't do it yourself at a simplistic level. Not that that is ever the best choice for you, but just that you didn't even do that. And you weigh them against the agencies you're currently looking at, and you're not seeing great production from them. You're looking for a change, and you say, well, these guys will just come in and take care of everything. And all we do is write a check for their success. And as long as they're successful, they'll keep getting checks. And they will be, because they're going to take credit for everything. So that's one lazy that has to get fixed. Don't do that. The second lazy is we still look at things the way we've always operated them. And what do I mean by that? Well, in this new world with GA4 and then traffic and the data that we can gather, we still look at the same numbers. Now, we've had a show 2 shows ago that talked about what numbers you're looking at. And it was really referencing to the simplicity that we still tether ourselves to on the types of data points that we are more comfortably familiar with. And I thought back, because I have the chance now to have had the work history to look at transitional points that happened in our industry. And one of the more pivotal ones to our industry was the transition of the value of internet as a marketing medium and as a production source compared to the way things had been doing before that. And what I mean by that is there was the old traditional way. So you had certain channels of marketing communication. You had magazines and newspapers. You had your hotel book that you had to put an advertisement in. You had roadside signs. You had local CBB and chamber activities that would put TV shows up. You had all of these things that were really trying to, there were just certain channels that were available. And so for that reason, they didn't understand the new world that internet was. I remember working with GM that was running another hotel while I was running one. And I had adopted taking on the internet and made a website for it, even though it was a branded site, because at the time, Hilton had nothing to do with online. And there was a discussion between ownerships as to the expense of advertising in this flight magazine. This is when we had airports, hotels by an airport. And it was leaked that we were in competition with buying a piece of advertisement space on the flight magazine that came into our airport. Actually, it went to a lot of airports, but so it was very expensive. And I argued that we shouldn't do it. And I remember this GM across the table adamant that I was ignorant to the value of what it was, and that he would be totally successful with taking over what I'm basically surrendering to him, and that he'll prove his point. Sadly, he got terminated because at the end of it, it produced little to nothing that could ever be a value to it. There was no tracking, no nothing. And not that there was great tracking back in the day of 2004, 2005. But we could show that what we did online and the money we spent to be online, very much at a fledgling time, more about banner ads, how's that, than it was about actual search marketing, produced better because of the offer we made specific only to it than anything that he had put as a general branding offer for his hotel to be aware in the market. And I remember that was a defining point. We defined GMs of those that were too stubborn to change didn't last long. Those that were willing to change adapted and grew and were able to last. The real innovators were the ones that embraced it and see what more they could do with it. I feel we're at that point with AI now and the tools that we have available to us now and the data that we can use now. As long as we can become unfettered as to how we handle the data. Going back to a solution that we're providing. So we have this massive amounts of GA4 data. We're generating these amazing dashboards that show incredible correlations of data that just now that we never had access to. We never had the ability to gather this much data and manipulate this much data. And to the point of overwhelming, like, what do we do with this? How do we even understand it? I see the number and I see that there's value to it, but how do I use that into an actual thing? And we've had discussions in the live show about that. Like, how do we translate what this data shows us into usable, actionable things? And that requires insight. And we went through the 4 steps. Remember, we went through the 4 progressions of the data usage, the affirmation, point of truth, the prescriptive, and then, the interpretive and then the prescriptive, as to how to use the data to make decisions with it. So we have this data, but we're still thinking of it in terms of how we used to look at data. And so right now, like I said, have all these dashboards and so forth. We're actually making a more simplistic dashboard that is using, it's funny to say this, old school numbers, because that's what's understood by most people. For those that have been working with the internet data associated with hospitality for so long, they get very familiar with certain numbers. And we talked again on the show just a couple shows ago about this tethered connection to familiarity, going to tab 4 in a star report, looking for your RevPAR index compared to your comp set, looking at your total website traffic and total people going to your booking engine, total people that converted from your booking engine, this larger to smaller funnel perspective. And it's numbers that are familiar, they're comfortable, they understand it or can interpret them because of familiarity, not because of value, but because of familiarity. Because at the time, those were some of the only numbers that we had available. Those were only some of the numbers that were proved to be valid markers of any sort of interpretive value. Like, do we have a lot of people come to our website? Did a lot of those people go to our booking engine? Did a lot of those book? What channels drove them to the booking engine? What was the cost of those channels? What was the conversion of each of those channels? So which channel is better? That's very functional, familiar territory for a lot of people. But it's very, what you would call two-dimensional thinking. And I say that being a Star Trek geek. In The Wrath of Khan, when they were in the nebula fighting Khan, and here's this brilliant person, Khan, fighting the brilliant Captain Kirk. Spock leans over to him, to Captain Kirk, after being shot at and so forth. He says he's intelligent but not experienced. His pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking. That's what we're seeing in a lot of service providers right now, is that they're intelligent. They understand the platforms. They understand the tools in the sense of how to build ad campaigns. They understand how to build social media campaigns. They know what pixels are for and how to use them in most senses. But they don't truly understand by experience the value of them. They don't know how to manipulate that information better now that they have better data. And that's the point I'm trying to make with the idea of breaking lazy and skipping out of the skeuomorphisms that we use as familiar trending. Looking at just traffic to your website, looking at just traffic to your funnel, to your booking agent, looking at traffic that converts from your funnel and the channels acquiring it, is a very simplistic two-dimensional perspective of the data, especially when there's so much more data. Now, as with anything, when you criticize something, you should come with this alternative solution as to why you don't think what's right, what's working is wrong, is wrong. But now, what do you think should be able to fix it? So here's my solution for this. AI can make massive insights, the prescriptive that we've talked about a few shows ago, on the data that you're getting, actionable decision-making kind of things. Once you define what it should be looking for you for, remember, it's a brilliant 5-year-old child. It doesn't know unless you are very specific about what you're asking it to do. So you have all of this data. Now, what you're looking for is, 1, to understand the data. 2, what to do with the understanding you get from the data in the sense of actual items. We limit ourselves, by example, based on historically what we're capable of doing. Let's take, for instance, paid ad campaigns. Paid ad campaigns required a lot of manual lifting up front. A lot of agencies would tell you there's 2 models to work with. You either paid heavy up front for the agency to cover its cost associated with the onboarding of a new client, and then at that point, diminished cost later on because there was less work. It was just once the ship's built, you're sailing it. The other was, okay, we're not going to charge you heavy up front, but we will charge you consistently during the duration of the contract to recoup the heavy load of work that we had to do up front that we didn't get to get compensated for in its completeness, that every month thereafter we get paid the monthly thereafter. That was usually the 2 models associated with agency relationships with clients. When this gets done, things get put on automation. They get created and they get put through. So, and you heard me complain about this before whenever we audit a lot of places. You have 2 brands. You have two ad group campaigns. You have brand and you have non-brand. Brand is just that. It's very rudimentary, variations on the way people identify your property. Names, variations, misspells, long string sentences, short string sentences, negatives on certain derivatives that may be similar to you. Think of the word Victoria. Victoria Falls, Victoria Springs versus Victoria, England, because Victoria the Queen. define the terms. What's the name of your business? Non-brand is usually contained into destination, ancillary location, addresses, NAP information, name, address, phone number kind of stuff. Destination information, proximity information, travel interest, general stuff of things about what you are and where you are. It's very, very little expounded upon. Then you have usually a third generalized one that usually gets thrown into brand just because they usually harbor it there. And that is promotional offers and things where you have unique offers that you have unique campaigns for. That's great that an agency even does that, because a lot of times they're lazy and don't do that either. But then they set them and they run them until they forget them. And then unless you come to them and they give them something new in which they build a campaign for it, and then it runs its course until it's died and dead and it's no longer producing. And once it's been a dead horse dragged for a mile, they turn it off, maybe. And then you have to collaborate on what the next one is and you turn it on. And that latency is the dips and valleys that you have in your performance model. Stop me if you haven't heard this story before. So that's the way things are. Building these campaigns, these ad groups within these campaigns, is labor intensive. You have character limitations on headers. You have character limitations on descriptive lines. You have to create variations so that you have some differences between ad 1 and ad 2. You have differences between ad 2 and ad 3, so forth and so on. Different images get used, different keywords get inserted dynamically, different descriptions get inserted dynamically. Those have to be created. Category, title, topping, subcategory variations. Very labor intensive and requires a certain creative capability. Now, AI has helped with some of that, where some of the AI, people have begun to realize that they can define what they're asking for in the context of limitations, and AI will come up with a lot of choices that you can make, that you can choose from, but you still have to move and implement and put things in. Some agencies are beginning to explore automating this process, where they will use AI to take out your brand tone and your information from your existing website, understand your product, fill in some more gaps as to what you provided for data, and then move it over to making an automated capability of creating variations of ads. That's great. It does allow for diversity. As we've talked about on the show many, many times, initiation of any new campaigns require a wide scattering of a lot of variations, because you may have the same ad, but it may be targeted in many different ways to see if the combinations of A/B or multivariant create different results. Those different results, based on a KPI that you've defined, traffic and or conversion and or engagement, to lack of a better way of clarifying it, exist whether it merits consideration of keeping it running. Audience perspective, voice of brand, whatever category. If it's in a brand category, you're more willing to accept traffic than you are conversion. If it's in a non-branded campaign, you're more willing to accept conversion than traffic. These are variables that are very much manual in the process of ad campaign construction. AI gives you the ability to amplify these things. Wonder if you could create hundreds, if not thousands, of variations of ads on all types of filters, on all types of ad variations of headers and different descriptions and images used and videos created and video variations and so forth. Well, then you begin to get a sense of what PMax is really trying to get to, in the sense of what Google's trying to make it do. But also, you're beginning to realize that you can then have much better understanding of the engagement of these values, keeping in mind that time is a variant as well. What you produce in May of 2024 may not work right now, but may work like gangbusters in September. Don't discard everything. Simply turn it on and off, but hold it and remember writing notes as to why you created the conceptual relationship with those ad campaigns, to see if that concept applies at a different time. But what I'm saying about advancing yourself out of lazy is realizing that this set and forget until it's dead has to change. That was done because of the financial relationships with agencies and the client's awareness or lack of awareness in the relationship of what they should be asking for from those agencies. Agencies take a "if they don't ask, we shouldn't be worried about it" mentality. A lot of times they're not there to stir the pot. They're not there to challenge whether or not they're doing a good job by asking whether there's things, pointing out things that can be done or should be done differently. They figure if the client doesn't ask, then they're happy, that's good. And if the client does get mad at it later, they can easily point to the fact they never asked. That's how that relationship usually runs its course. By the same token, clients wish that their vendors would be a little bit more proactive in letting them know what they need to be doing rather than asking what they should do. Pointing out what they're discovering, pointing out what they think might be a lead, pointing out what they might move towards. But it's dangerous territory because you always want to bat 1,000. You never want to miss and swing and a miss. Vendors don't want to point out failures. But failures is what you need to go improve what you're doing is viable because you had to try all the other variations that didn't work. It's a counterproductive perspective. So what happens is that we get tied in keeping the numbers familiar to the client, gross traffic, gross funnel, gross conversion, very generalized, which means that the conversations are very superficial. They don't get very granular. Vendors, what I just described in doing, the multivariances of ads and the multiplicities of the variations of the ads, requires work, which requires pay. Why pay what's not being asked for? Why incur cost? If the client asks for it, then you can tell the client's going to cost the money. If the client agrees to it, then you'll do the time. Great, that's billable time. You can propose that it would take more time to do this, but the client's going to want to know why, and you're going to tell them you don't know what you're doing for sure, which is why you need to do as many variations to get a better picture of everything is. And they're going to be like, so we're paying you to basically make mistakes. Yes, no, we don't want to do that. We only want to pay for successes. You see how the model doesn't work? So you need to understand that AI can do these things. Now, either it's initiated by the vendor who goes out and takes the time and effort to look at the multiplicities of things, make the efforts, and make the case to a client that says, look, I'm going to need $1,500, $5,000, $500, whatever the number is, based on what you've come up with data, not just a dartboard, that says, looking at what we're looking at, we'd like to create a widespread campaign related to this targeting for this initiative for these reasons. We believe on the preliminary traffic by looking at what we'd be doing this for, that this is this much audience, applying our current conversions, high and low, we'll get an average mean. Our average mean conversion is this number. If that translates to current forecasted ADRs that you have and current and transaction values that you have, then this represents that by spending this money, we should be able to garner this. No guarantee. In fact, it might just break even. But the idea is that we will have a much cleaner perspective of how to make a better targeted campaign that will generate the value proposition for the money's being spent for it. In other words, getting out of that ROI first discussion. Talk about the value long term. Talk about the actual numbers being used, not just, well, if you give us $500, we can try making some exploratory A/B testing and multivariate ads, and we'll see what comes out of it. Sure, let me just light a match to the end of a $500 bill. Do they even have those anymore? And watch it burn, because I have no idea what's going to come out of it. It's really just saying, let's try something, let's see what happens. Yes, but you have to qualify that statement. You have to talk about why you're wanting to do it in numbers sense, data sense. We see this traffic. We don't feel we're optimizing that traffic. We feel if we were able to put a campaign spread over that traffic, first to find out what it is, second to find what is engaged with from it, third to find out if there's a conversion value from it or if it's just traffic value. We see that to do that, we would need to spend this much money at this current cost for these keywords that are targeted for this campaigns at this relative average conversion opportunity of what we think it could be, high and low, medium and in the middle, to see a value proposition. If it even trends in a way that we didn't expect, zero goose egg, we can pull the plug faster just because we don't want to bleed to death the money and see if there's a better opportunity in a different model elsewhere. Google gives us these abilities. They give us the ability to create Google scripts. They give us the ability to create testing where it'll faux run the campaign to show you what it could have done had you done actual money, kind of like testing in college, the stock market, fictitious money, fictitious program, see what fictitiously you would have made or lost. So you can do these things. Now, here's the rub of it. If you do a test with no money, take your automation with Google, and it does blindly well. It did blindly well during May of 2024. It doesn't mean that you turn it on in June of 2024 that the same campaign run is going to generate the same thing, unless it's targeted for the same people, obviously. And when I mean targeted by the same people, I don't mean demographic, behavioral, and behavioral. What I mean is action items. For instance, people that went to your booking engine and looked for 2+ night stays but didn't book. That's an audience to cultivate. You want long-term stays? That's a great audience to cultivate. People that went to your booking engine didn't book. with the past 30 days? Well, they're obviously at a level of wanting to understand you better to the point of purchase, better to pursue a high frequency retargeting campaign with them. People that looked at your future events of May next year on your content of your website. Well, in that case, let's go over and do a long, slow interaction with people and try to get them on a social channel, which we can give them helpful content without having to spend a tremendous amount of money to keep it in front of them. These are the choices that need to be made. These are the interactions that need to happen with your vendors, third party or internal, that are handling your marketing. And this is the kind of dialogue that you raise in front of the client. The best advice is the advice that's not well received. It truly is. If everybody's a yes man, if everybody is happy with what's being done and doesn't feel like something could be done better or was done wrong, then that means you're going to fall into a belief that you are in disbelief when something fails, because we've done everything right to this point. How could we be wrong now? That doesn't work in our real world. Our world changes. Our forecasts change. Ask anybody that's made one. Ask anybody that's made a budget. It's not what it never lands exactly right. It's just when it's like you're hoping to be close enough. So these are the things that go along with my topic today of breaking lazy, how Skeuomorphism is keeping us on average. And if you need to know how it's spelled, Skeuomorph is skeuomorph. Skeuomorphism is the practice of using old images related to current functions as a continuity between what it was before and attributes about how it had to function before to compare to what we use it for now. For instance, incandescent light bulb icon, we don't have them that way anymore, but that's the way for us to mentally connect that that's a light switch in comparison to a light bulb that was no longer being used. So there you go. Thank you so very much for watching us live on our YouTube TV, on our TV channel. Also watching us simulcast on YouTube TV, Facebook pages, X, and LinkedIn. For all of our associations that run us live, and for all of our other corporate friends that run us on their web pages and on their Facebook pages and on their YouTube channels. Thank you so much for that. Of course, watching us on our TV channel, Hospitality Channel. Thank you so much for that. We're in 209 countries. We will send out or rebroadcast this show 11:30 a.m. London time, which is ironic because I'm in the time zone here, Wednesdays, and also 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends. So hopefully the dialogue was helpful. The insight as to reevaluating how you're approaching your strategies for your platforms might have been helpful, I hope. And we will talk to you next week for show number 461. Location might still be Den Haag. I'll let you know. But until then, my name is Lauren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time. I look forward to talking to you all next week.